Let's talk about toxic fans. Fandom is defined as the state or condition of being a fan of someone or something. This is most often seen in online, fictional, or sports-related hobbies. However, many fans consistently take their opinions and treatment of others much too far. These people are referred to as toxic fans, and they've been plaguing spaces both online and IRL for decades. Groups will often compare their interests, seemingly bragging that they have the most toxic fans, almost as if learning how to deal with them and pursue the interest anyways is a sign of resilient superiority. But should these toxic fans really be referred to as fans? After all, a significant aspect of being a fan of someone or something is to connect with other people over the shared interest. Yet many will try and gatekeep aforementioned interests and become aggressive, possessive, and unwelcoming. In my previous video about how fandoms will be around forever, I touched on toxic fan bases and was encouraged by you guys to dedicate an entire video to the concept. So if you're unsure about what fandom is, you can go back and watch that video. If you've already seen it or have a general idea of what it's about, then feel free to stay with this one. The source that got this all started was a video posted by Pillar of Garbage titled "The Problem with Toxic Fans." Here, the creator states that a Patreon member theorized the phrase toxic fans legitimizes anger as a form of fan love and supports the idea that toxic fans are still genuine fans.
I got a few different answers, a couple humorous, some similar to the above, but also other ideas. For instance, the idea that knowledge is required. Others boiled it down immensely, stressing that to be a fan is simply to like something. A couple of people agreed that there was an element of self-designation here. That is, you're a fan of something if you decide to be, if you consider yourself a fan. That's interesting, because that's an angle which wasn't super present in any of the previous definitions.
Overall, having an exact definition has been very ambiguous and difficult to create, even after several years of discussing fandom, because fans and fandoms are constantly changing. Their people, their concepts, their interests, they're going to be fluid in their nature. There's a lot to be said about what the most toxic fan bases are, arguably to the point where it almost seems to become a competition of who can be part of or have interacted with the most toxic fan bases. The ones that I saw the most throughout a variety of threads and my personal experience on the internet are diet and fitness groups, Call of Duty, League of Legends, sports fans, more specifically the ones who worship one person and disregard or hate everyone else, music artists, older ones like Barry Manilow, newer ones like Taylor Swift, Rust, Counter-Strike, Andrew Tate, Minecraft YouTubers, Supernatural, due to aggressively shipping characters, Heartstopper, because fans bullied one of the main characters into outing himself, K-pop, because people couldn't give any kind of critique without being torn to shreds, and fans would be very possessive of members and be upset if they had a life outside of being an idol, and Steven Universe. Not so much now, but in the past, a fan was bullied into attempting suicide for drawing a typically buff character in a slimmer way. In fact, there are so many toxic fandoms that it's gotten to the point where people have just written it off and said fandom is toxic and a parasocial waste of time and energy that comes at the cost of real life. A lot of people use fandom as a form of escapism, which, though may work temporarily, long-term it has been found by many people who interact with fandoms to stunt personal growth in real-life situations. Being super invested into a fandom can definitely take away at other parts of a person's life, so when that fandom is their whole world and then they're surrounded by other fans who kind of curate that bubble, but it's a bubble that doesn't really allow anything else in, which can be a huge part of the toxic environment being created, because not only does it not allow other parts of the fans' life in, but it doesn't allow other fans of the interest in. It doesn't allow other perspectives or theories about the interest in, and that is where a big part of the toxicity comes in.
Let's represent this yellow guy as an actual good person, while this green guy as, well, an asshole. The good fans support each other in this collaborative community where they work together and build each other up. They're also pretty open-minded, as they don't mind non-fans watching or liking different things, as they are well aware that what they like isn't everyone's cup of tea. And on some occasions, they may request something they think would be nice, but also respects the rights of the creator to reject those suggestions and focus on their own creative direction. And while the good fans are like two people drinking tea and having a nice conversation at a cafe, the toxic fans are the opposite. They're like those people who chug 3 bottles of energy drinks and perform a rap battle just to see who's the loudest and most annoying person there. Toxic fans have a sense of entitlement, possessiveness, and superiority. They attack other fans as they feel like they are the only true fans and that the other fans or non-fans are just quote-unquote normies. They brag that they're special just because of the thing they like. They often treat any form of criticism for any show, movie, or any forms of entertainment as some personal insult and will often react very emotionally. There's a lot of controlling, nagging, harassment, and bullying that often targets young people as they haven't developed a full understanding of the world around them. And in some cases, they will often create huge demands to the creators, some of which are impossible to meet, and will send threats to those creators if those demands aren't met. And the final characteristic is that they are so caught up in their fandom from their obsessiveness, validation, and attention, if they have any validation and attention, that they'll stop caring about other people in the outside world, whether it's someone they've never met before or someone important, like a friend or a family member.
Joseph R. Carroll made a really fantastic video titled Why Fandoms Are So Bad, and made a lot of other really good points in here, so I definitely recommend watching the full thing, especially if you want a few more details on different fandom experiences and just some of the kind of hate that becomes part of it. I found this really great Quora thread where this top post in particular compiled a lot of really good reasons as to why communities or people can be toxic within their fan community. The first one is passion, which is a really big part of just kind of enjoying anything. Passion is important to have throughout life in general, but it can go a bit too far sometimes, which can lead to overly emotional and aggressive behavior. The second is identity, which is a problem that a lot of people have run into over the past year or so, where many of their favorite creators have been exposed to be creeps or pedophiles or abusers, where this person that they've connected part of their personality and identity with is suddenly revealed to be a bad person, and handling that is difficult. So it can sometimes react in very defensive and aggressive and therefore toxic behaviors as a response. The third is anonymity, which I cannot pronounce, and we will come back to because another creator who also cannot pronounce this word right made a fantastic video where a large chunk of it went into the discussion of how being anonymous online can alter people's behavior and essentially enables them to say things without the identification attachment. Fourth is group dynamics, because in large fan communities in particular, they can definitely come into play. The formation of cliques and different groups can create rival groups in a very strange sense. For instance, in the Swifties fandom, there is a group of Taylor Swift fans who are hell-bent insistent on believing that she is a lesbian. And there's another group that is completely the opposite of that. There's this battle, this very intense battle, it seems, that happens online between the different fans. And though they both like listening to Taylor Swift, it can create a very us versus them mentality, even though it's still the same interest. The fifth is echo chambers, which is very similar to group dynamics, where social media and online platforms can essentially create echo chambers where like-minded fans can reinforce each other's ideas and beliefs, which can take place within groups where a single group could be like an echo chamber, but that leads to escalation of toxic behavior and exclusion of certain people. Sixth is lack of moderation, and I feel like this most commonly happens with celebrities or music artists who simply have too much to do to really worry about how fans are interacting with each other, not exactly realizing the issues that go along with that. And then the seventh is simply misplaced priorities, where fans will start to prioritize their favorite artist or sports team or franchise or IP over other people in their life and common decency. Now, back to the idea of anonymous interactions online, because they definitely affect how people interact with each other as a whole. This is especially true for people who don't really do any kind of content creation or post on Instagram, TikTok maybe, and instead they just have accounts to kind of look at other people's stuff, comment things every now and then, and go on about their day. But because there aren't really any strings attached to those accounts, it allows a lot of toxicity to be spewed.
So I went and read a bunch of research papers on anonymity and the internet and how it affects our behavior. There is a widely held belief that the ability to be anonymous on the internet contributes and influences the way we behave, and maybe that we would say things we wouldn't normally say face to face. Honestly, the research supports this. Several studies show that people tend to be much more aggressive when they are anonymous, both online and even in person. One interesting thing that was brought up in most of these studies, though, is that even when anonymous, they said that the social norms or behaviors of the group highly influenced the anonymous identity's behavior as well. So even on the internet, even when we're anonymous, we have a desire to conform to the social norms of a group setting. I noticed that it's a little different on YouTube because discussion isn't as clear on YouTube. A lot of it is more individual comments directed at the creator or between the creator and the commenter, rather than a commenter and other commenters. It happens, but I don't think as frequently as on Twitter and Reddit. As such, there isn't as much of a group social norm to follow. I can't tell you the number of times someone has put a completely rude and awful comment directed at me in my YouTube channel, but when I respond to it in even a kind or normal way, the amount of apologies I've gotten staggers me. Like, how could they say something so rude and so gross, but then the minute I respond, all of a sudden backtrack? It's very clear to me they did not view me as a real person. They did not view me as somebody who could read and respond to their comments. And once that social behavior norm was crossed, when they realized it was like having a conversation with a real person, the backtracking of the aggressive nature is very interesting.
What the hell? Oh my God, no way.
It is now called the 1% theory of fandom. Essentially, it detailed that probably about 1% of every fandom sucks. But if your fandom is only 500 people large, dealing with those 5 people is a breeze. Now multiply your fandom by 100,000. That's 1,000 people causing a ruckus. Now multiply it to 5 million. Now you have 50,000 people causing problems. That's 50,000 people sending death threats, making terrible remarks on Twitter, etc. If you're an author or an actor or a creator in some way, getting a single death threat is probably something to shake you up, but ultimately you can probably move on from it. But multiply it to 5,000 death threats or 50,000 death threats, and all of a sudden that's gonna start feeling like an overwhelming majority, even if it's not. Yes, it's only 1% of that fandom, but that fandom's vitriol is gonna feel very persuasive and very impactful. It's going to feel impossible to ignore. Now, there obviously isn't any actual numerical data to back this up, because how would you even go around measuring this? It feels very difficult to even measure how large a fandom is in many ways. But it feels right to me. The larger a fandom grows, the larger likelihood you're gonna have people who just don't know how to behave themselves in a normal way or react to being disappointed in a productive way.
Overall, Bookborn makes a lot of fantastic points about what it's like to be a person of interest, like a celebrity, music artist, or creator, between mentions of the 1% theory, where, 1% of fans are going to be toxic, but that number becomes massive when there's something like 5 million fans in a group, and how a lot of fans, good or bad, struggle to view the people that they admire as people. Ultimately, the vast majority of people that we are a fan of, if they are actually people, we see through a screen, which leaves a lot of opportunities for parasocial relationships to be formed. Though that's not necessarily an issue when reading a fictional book and falling in love with the fictional characters, it does become a problem when real people aren't seen as people. Because of this, I propose both a new definition for being a fan and a new way to refer to toxic fans. After seeing a variety of people's opinions on what being a fan of something or someone is like, and being a fan of multiple interests myself, I would define being a fan as having some level of knowledge and emotional, time, or financial investment for an interest which is consumed via some form of media while actively identifying oneself as being a fan and maintaining interest. The identifying as a fan is an important part because there are people who certainly have knowledge about something and who maybe put in some kind of financial investment, like for instance buying a concert ticket to see an artist that they know the genre of music they make and maybe they know how long the tour has been, but they wouldn't necessarily consider themselves a fan. Granted, I doubt this will be a permanent thing, since the definition of being a fan is fluid and has changed over time. But as a whole, people understand that being a fan of something involves positive consumption of the media while relating to others who share the same interest. Because of that, I don't think toxic fans should be considered fans at all, but should instead be referred to as toxic devotees. Since, yes, they support the fandom and follow along with their interests, but they do it in an obsessive, aggressive, and negative way. I think this definition would be appropriate since devotee is defined as a person who's greatly devoted to something, a person who is extremely devoted to religion, i.e. a follower, or an enthusiastic follower or fan. So it relates to the fan definition a bit, but it deviates enough that I think it conveys more of the investment into something that is not necessarily positive. If you think any of this is completely wrong, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you've had your own very negative experiences with fandoms, feel free to mention those as well. A lot more people than I think the internet realizes as a whole has been treated badly by fans and fandoms, so I'm sure you will likely find someone who has had a very similar experience to yours, since there's a lot of negativity in the world. So if you're a fan, then just be chill. And don't try and be weird and controlling and overpossessive for both the interest and other people. Bye.